From social media to TV ads, we're constantly flooded with the idea that we need to have the perfect body for a happier and healthier life. We even have a name for it, diet culture. This is a misconception that our physical appearance is more important than our well-being. As a result, people may obsess over good and bad food, control our bodies through diets like detoxes, and resort to self-depreciating talk. For some, this can lead to struggles with eating disorders and mental health issues. In this episode, we'll talk more about the impact that diet culture has on Filipinos today. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Weight stigma can be seen as deeply entrenched in our society. Our guests are here today to tell us more about diet culture and how we can best combat it. With us is Dr. Dex Macalintal, who is a lifestyle medicine specialist and registered nutritionist dietitian from Calamba Medical Center. Also with us is Epi Gochanco. He's a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist at the Asian Hospital and Medical Center. Earlier on the show, we mentioned that diet culture refers to the belief that our appearance matters more than our health as well as our well-being. Epi, let's start the conversation with you. Tell us more about this, and why are people talking about it more frequently?
It has something to do with popularity and being accepted by people. Diet culture is actually talking about mostly having a good appearance, but it has to be understood that having a good appearance has something to do with also having to lose weight. But the question is, does this apply to everybody? Everybody has a certain body type, and therefore it isn't as simple as just looking at the appearance. It goes deeper into the psyche, where people also get to feel bad about themselves. There's self-blame, there's guilt because they have to be looked at a certain way. And society, and as they say, the social media has something to do with it because they set the standards for how a person should look like.
Diet culture is fueled by the internet and social media, but the food industry has taken advantage of the narrative that skinny is good and heavy is bad. Unfortunately, this often leads to what they call fat talk. Epi, please explain to our viewers what this is and how does it affect people?
If you look at the definition of both, it sounds the same. It's just that in diet culture, the values and beliefs are there, and the fat talk is the behavior, meaning to say they say negative things about how one looks, what they eat, the choices of food. Everything is about negative comments. And see, the problem is if you have so many negative comments, it goes into your psyche again. And these negative comments actually will affect how you see yourself and others. Therefore, it's always negative. And negative thoughts is not good. In fact, if you look at it, most depression comes from negative thoughts.
Diet culture and fat talk is so embedded in society that we might not realize that we are perpetuating it. Epi, what are some examples of fat talk in the Philippines or in Filipino culture?
If you listen to people outside while they eat, some people will say, for example, you're taking too much salt or you're eating too much rice. And, oh, I notice you have more curves now, something like that. So this kind of talking is actually negative comments, and it actually makes other people and oneself feel bad about themselves.
All this talk about beauty, diet, and exercise can significantly impact how we feel about ourselves. Dr. Dex, walk us through how diet culture can affect a person's self-esteem.
Well, we've been talking about fat talk and diet culture. And diet culture is a belief that appearance and body shape are more important than the physiologic, psychological, and general well-being of the person. It is one factor that contributes to disordered eating habits. If a dieter fails to attain his or her ideal look, he or she may feel bad about him or herself, thus affecting their self-esteem, telling themselves, I'm not perfect, I'm not likable, I'm not beautiful, etc. This is essentially a form of degrading oneself. It is very problematic in that that it is associated with body dissatisfaction, which may in turn to, again, eating disorders. It would promote unhealthy behaviors around food and with our bodies. And we must remember that the focus should be on developing healthy behaviors when we are going on a diet. And it is not merely about the appearance. And again, this should be addressed in public forums like this one.
Now, eating disorders have become prevalent in young women today. The National Eating Disorders Association estimates that 10 to 20% of women in college suffer from an eating disorder. Dr. Dex, what exactly is an eating disorder? And could you tell us more about how it affects young women today? Give us an idea of what might be going through their minds.
Eating disorders happen when people get a negative relationship with food. So usually they binge, they purge, and they binge and they purge again. So what happens here is sometimes people have this negative relationship with food, them being telling that food is enemy. So anong nangyayari dito, nagkakaroon na sila ng hirap ng pagkain, they have difficulty in taking in food, no? And then minsan nagkakaroon sila ng nutrient deficiencies, which then can lead to a lot of diseases in the long run.
Now, a person with an eating disorder might focus on prioritizing low-calorie food, or they might view exercise as an excuse to work off so-called bad foods. Now, in the long run, this can be detrimental to their health. Dr. Dex, walk us through some of the warning signs of an eating disorder and how can loved ones best help these people who are struggling with it?
Number one, hindi na nila gustong kumain. Okay? And they really get this excuse na, mag-exercise naman ako or ipapurge ko din naman ito. So these are warning signs na medyo hindi maganda. Yung mga pauna na warning sign ay yung hindi nila masyadong gustong kumain. That's actually yung first sign na ayaw nila kumain, parang iniisip nila, that's bad food. And then they label good foods and bad foods, especially nowadays that social media is very rampant on giving us a look on what should be perfect, so to speak. Nakikita natin sa skin nila, they have dry skin already. And then ito na, nagbe-binge, nagpe-purge, and then they really have this negative connotation about food, that food could be their enemy.
For many, losing weight is an unrelenting goal to strive for. How can this quest for the perfect body impact someone's mental health? More on this when we return. We're your partner in healthcare. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. There are definitely times that we subconsciously encourage today's diet culture. It's the notion that being skinny equates to beauty as well as success, and that eating a certain way will result in the correct size. But this idea sets many people up to feel bad about themselves. Epi, what are some of the negative impacts of diet culture to our mental health?
It does affect how one feels about oneself, as you already mentioned. It affects how it gets generalized in their behavior. For example, if one person says, I shouldn't eat this, I will look bad, and judges himself all the time, what happens, they start also feeling a bit paranoid, thinking that other people might be thinking the same way about them, and then they feel bad all the time. They feel guilt all the time.
Now, a common effect of this is that it changes a person's relationship with their partner, their family, or even their friends. Tell us more about this, Epi.
When they start having this feeling that other people think the same thing about how they think, then they usually have a more stressful relationship with others. It becomes strained, and they start to distance themselves from others, or they isolate themselves because they think that others are also judging them the same way that they judge themselves.
More importantly, it impacts a person's relationship with themselves. Dr. Dex, how does diet culture affect body image, especially among adolescents?
Well, people involved in diet culture believe that being thin, again, is equivalent to being healthy, and being on the other side of the spectrum, meaning being on the heavier side, means that one is unhealthy. This is very evident in people who are restricting their diets too much, adhering to fad diets, For example, yung mga gluten-free diet, when he or she is not really intolerant or allergic to gluten. It is also very evident nowadays in online communities, on social media. If a member of a group deviates a little bit on their preaching, it would seem that this other members sort of crucify them for their doing. This promotes a negative relationship with food and to a person's self.
Could you talk more about the vegan diet, more so on the part where how this can affect someone either for the better or some of the limitations that people should understand whenever they make the choice to go for the vegan diet?
Well, the vegan diet involves you eating more of your vegetables, more of your fruits, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes, and you deviate from eating meat. That is the strict vegan diet. So what happens here is that, yes, it has a lot of benefits. Like, for example, you get more vitamins, more nutrients, more micronutrients, more phytonutrients, and at less calories. So you really lose a lot of weight until you have the ideal body weight. The downside here is that if we eat a little less meat, or if we eat no meat at all, we are losing a little bit on the high biologic value of your protein. So this then can lead to your iron deficiency anemia and even megaloblastic anemia.
Dr. Dex, what advice can you give for the viewers who are watching this who are unsure about which diet to take or which diet is best for them? What advice can you give them? And should the viewers also be aware of any risks in a certain diet when it comes to the other facets of the body, the cardiovascular system, the endocrine system, and all the others? How does this equate as a whole?
There is no one-size-fits-all diet. You follow a nutritional guideline. For example, the nutritional guideline for the Filipinos, the first one is to eat a variety of foods every day, because there's no one food that can give you or supply you with the nutrients that you need for the whole day. Don't indulge on fad diets that you've just seen on social media. O nakapayat to, so okay to. Being thin or being on the lighter side doesn't equate to being healthy. So you can be on the heavier side, but you're still healthy. You can be on your normal body weight and you stay healthy. Read only medically verified articles online. There are a lot of accessible journal articles, but since nutrition is an absolute mess, if you're going to check them, make sure that the bias is very low and try to check on the funding of the studies. If you are really at a loss, and what I can do for you, for our viewers, is to lead you to a website called hellodoctor.com.ph, where I am one of their medical editors. Trust only a registered nutritionist dietitian. As you would for your problems with the eye, you go to an ophthalmologist. For problems with your skin, you go to a dermatologist. For problems with your bones, you go to an orthopedic surgeon.
No matter what age, we need to work together to promote a healthier view on food and weight. More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk. Today, we're talking about diet culture and how to best resist it for a truly happy and healthy you. Avoiding diet culture might be impossible due to its pervasive nature in society, but there are certainly ways to limit our exposure to it. Can you give us some tips regarding this, Epi?
Accept oneself the way one is. As I've said earlier, there are different body types. And one should understand that not because another person is really slim, that we should be as slim as the other person, because that may not be our body type. We have to accept what we have. And no matter how one looks, if that is how our body type is, we can still be healthy, even if we're not as thin as the other person. The other thing is that we should talk less about negative things, to have less of to take out the fat talk, meaning to say one should stop saying, oh, I have so much bulges now on my tummy, or I've eaten too much of this, and it doesn't make me look good. All these things are negative thoughts, which is fat talk.
Diet culture results in having harmful practices as well, and a healthier way to go about your diet is through intuitive eating. Dr. Dex, first tell us about some of these unhealthy eating practices.
Number one, you too much food restriction. And then you binge and then you purge, you follow fad diets because there are a lot of testimonials. You eat too much processed foods. You eat too much sugars, you eat on the go so that you develop, again, a negative relationship with food. You get poor meal planning, you get giant portion sizes, and you avoid nutrient-dense foods just because some guru online says it is not healthy.
Now, Dr. Dex, talk about intuitive eating. How can this reverse these unhealthy practices?
All right, intuitive eating is an approach to feeding oneself, promoting a healthy attitude toward food and body image. This banks on the idea that if you're hungry, you can go eat. With intuitive eating, one respects the feeling of hunger and fullness. Eat when you're hungry and stop when you are full. These body signals are very important so that you will know when to start and when to stop eating. Actually, these principles to be followed are concepts that have been around since 60s and the 70s. Some principles include that there's no one-size-fits-all diet. You order your hunger. You make peace with food to develop a positive relationship with food. There are no good nor bad foods. Respect your fullness. You stop eating when you are full. You be satisfied with your food. You honor your feelings and you do not use food to fuel your feelings. And you respect your body. You exercise. And lastly, to honor your health.
Another helpful tip is to stop labeling food as good or bad. Dr. Dex, talk more about this as well.
If we label food as good or bad, definitely one principle of intuitive eating is already countered, and that is to accept that there is really no good or bad food. People labeling carbs or fats as bad and one should not eat them are not helping the ones who are struggling for their health. They can be toxic. They can create a toxic ecosystem that may actually harm more people than help them. I, for one, I have received a lot of patients coming in from fad diet groups, even mentored by their so-called gurus, who are now having difficulty on knowing what to eat. And they really have problems with their relationships with food, themselves, and their communities. We must remember that health is not equivalent to being thin. And I quote our mentor in lifestyle medicine, Dr. Michael Greger, the goal of weight loss is to become healthy or healthier. It is not to fit in a skinnier casket.
Ultimately, a healthy diet often starts with making informed decisions about what's best for your body. Now, before we go, what are some of the other practices that we can start with? Epi, can you share some of them?
One needs to understand that when one eats, it has something to do with how one looks nowadays. We have to understand that eating has something to do with how we survive in this world. And therefore, we have to eat to survive instead of eating to resolve some issues about love, about rejection, about abandonment. We have to be aware of our own feelings about how angry or sad we are instead, so that we won't be able to address this in our eating.
Now, diet culture represents an ongoing problem in our society, but choosing to love your body and nourishing it can harness a greater sense of fulfillment. Thank you, lifestyle medicine specialist Dr. Dex Macalintal and clinical psychologist Epi Gochanco for being with us today. We appreciate your time and your insights. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this has been MedTalk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.